The massive chamber floated in the void between stars, its crystal walls reflecting the light of distant galaxies. Inside this grand meeting hall, 12 of the most powerful alien races in the known universe gathered for their monthly council session. The air hummed with translation devices as different species communicated in their native tongues, creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones that would have been music to some ears. Commander Zara Kellogg stood tall at the center podium, her crystalline Zephyrian skin catching the ambient light and casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor. Her species had ruled this sector for over 3,000 years, and their technology was considered the pinnacle of galactic achievement. The Zephyrians had long ago abandoned physical warfare, preferring to dominate through superior intellect and advanced energy manipulation. To them, violence was a primitive solution used only by lesser beings. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 11 other advanced civilizations watched with varying degrees of interest. The Craxi delegation sat in perfect formation, their insectoid bodies moving in synchronized patterns that reflected their collective consciousness. Each individual Craxi was merely a node in their vast neural network, making them incredibly efficient at processing information and reaching unanimous decisions. They had eliminated concepts like fear, doubt, and individual desire centuries ago, viewing emotions as computational errors that hindered optimal performance. In the aquatic section of the chamber, the ancient Vorthak elder Glumoth floated in his specialized tank, his amphibious form undulating slowly through the synthetic water. The Vorthak were among the oldest species in the galaxy, having achieved interstellar travel when most other races were still discovering fire. Their accumulated wisdom spanned millennia, and they viewed younger species with the patient condescension of adults watching children play. Zara activated the holographic display above her head, showing a three-dimensional map of the Outer Rim territories. A small yellow dot pulsed at the edge of the projection, marking a recently discovered solar system containing 9 planets orbiting a modest yellow star. The third planet from this star appeared blue and green, covered in vast oceans and landmasses that seemed to teem with life. "Honored council members," Zara began, her melodic voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic amplifiers. "Our scouts have completed their preliminary survey of the system designated as Sol 3. The dominant species on the third planet calls themselves humans, and our initial assessment suggests they pose no significant threat to galactic stability." A ripple of amusement passed through the Craxi delegation, their antennae twitching in perfect unison. One of their speakers, a sleek black carapaced individual named Vextar, stepped forward. "Commander Kellogg's, what technological level have these humans achieved? Surely they cannot have progressed beyond basic metallurgy, if they have only recently been discovered." Zara manipulated the display, zooming in on the blue planet to show primitive-looking metal vessels floating in the void around it. "They have achieved rudimentary spaceflight, Admiral Vexitar. Their ships are constructed from simple alloys and powered by controlled chemical explosions. Most remarkable is their apparent inability to harness clean energy sources. They still burn fossil fuels extracted from their planet's crust, and their most advanced power generation relies on splitting atoms in highly dangerous and inefficient reactors." The assembled aliens exchanged glances that conveyed their shared superiority. To species that had mastered zero-point energy extraction and matter manipulation, the human reliance on such crude methods seemed almost comically primitive. The Vorthak elder Glumoth extended one of his tentacles toward the display, his ancient voice bubbling through the water with practiced authority. "Show us their social structures, Commander. Do they possess a unified planetary government? Have they achieved the logical progression beyond emotional decision-making that marks true civilization?" The hologram shifted to display various human settlements across their planet. Cities of metal and glass sprawled across continents, connected by networks of transportation systems that moved millions of individuals daily. But what caught the aliens' attention were the clear divisions visible even from orbit. Different regions showed distinct architectural styles, cultural patterns, and technological variations that suggested something far more chaotic than the orderly societies the Council was accustomed to. "This is where their primitive nature becomes most apparent," Zara explained, highlighting the borders between different human territories. They have divided their single planet into nearly 200 separate political entities, each claiming sovereignty over specific geographical regions. These groups frequently engage in armed conflicts over resources, territorial disputes, and ideological differences. They seem incapable of achieving the basic unity that marks the beginning of true civilization. Admiral Vextar's compound eyes glittered with what might have been amusement. They fight among themselves? How fascinatingly inefficient. The Craxi Collective achieved perfect unity over 4,000 years ago when we eliminated the chaos of individual consciousness. How can any species hope to progress while wasting energy on internal conflicts? Zara nodded in agreement and expanded the display to show recorded footage of human military activities. The aliens watched with mixture of fascination and disgust as primitive human soldiers moved across battlefields, carrying weapons that fired small metal projectiles propelled by chemical explosives. The humans seemed to exhibit remarkable physical endurance, continuing to fight even when injured, but their tactics appeared crude and emotionally driven, rather than based on logical, strategic principles. Observe their combat behavior, Zara continued, slowing the footage to highlight specific examples. They demonstrate an irrational attachment to fallen comrades, often risking multiple lives to retrieve individuals who are already dead or dying. This emotional decision-making leads to tactically unsound choices that any properly programmed military unit would avoid. The Vorthak elder Glumoth pulsed with what passed for laughter among his species. Such attachment to individual organisms suggests they have not yet learned to view themselves as components of a greater whole. They waste resources on sentiment rather than optimizing for collective success. The display shifted again to show human civilian populations, and here the aliens found even more evidence of human inferiority. The footage revealed humans engaging in activities that served no apparent logical purpose, creating art, playing competitive games, forming pair bonds based on emotional rather than genetic compatibility, and most puzzling of all, caring for members of other species who provided no obvious benefit to human survival. Perhaps most telling, Zara observed, is their bizarre practice of domesticating other planetary life forms. They expend significant resources maintaining relationships with creatures they call pets, which provide no nutritional, defensive, or reproductive advantages. Some humans even risk their lives to protect these other species, suggesting a fundamental misunderstanding of evolutionary priorities. The council chamber filled with sounds that approximated laughter across 12 different species. The concept of caring for weaker creatures without gaining tangible benefits was so foreign to their advanced civilizations that it seemed like evidence of severe cognitive malfunction. These aliens had long ago optimized their societies to eliminate such inefficiencies. Admiral Vextar stepped forward again, his voice carrying the confidence of a species that had never known defeat. Commander Kellogg's, what resistance can we expect if we decide to incorporate this human species into our empire? Their primitive technology and emotional instability suggest they would make adequate laborers if properly managed. Zara consulted her data tablets, displaying population figures and resource assessments. Current human population stands at approximately 7 billion individuals distributed across their planet, and a handful of small orbital installations. Their largest military vessels are roughly equivalent to our civilian transport ships in terms of firepower and defensive capabilities. Conservative estimates suggest that a single Zephyrian battle group could achieve complete orbital supremacy within days. The ancient Vorthak elder extended multiple tentacles toward the display, examining the human settlements with the practiced eye of a species that had conquered dozens of worlds. Their population density and resource distribution actually work in our favor. Unlike the scattered colonies some species establish, these humans have concentrated themselves in easily targeted urban centers. Standard occupation protocols should prove more than adequate. Around the chamber, representatives from the other alien species nodded their agreement. The Thoraxian hive minds calculated optimal resource extraction rates. The Silthari energy beings evaluated the potential for converting human neural patterns into computational matrices. The crystalline Nexari considered how human labor could be optimized for their deep space mining operations. Commander Zara Kellogg's raised her hands for attention, her crystalline features reflecting the unanimous confidence of the assembled council. The motion before us is clear. Authorization for a limited expeditionary force to secure human compliance and integration in a... The alarm bells echoed through the corridors of Earth Defense Station Alpha, as Captain Jake Morrison rushed toward the command center. 6 months had passed since the mysterious energy signatures first appeared at the edge of the solar system, and now those signals were moving steadily toward Earth. The massive view screen dominated the far wall of the command center, displaying 12 alien vessels in perfect formation as they approached the outer planets. Jake studied the alien ships through the tactical display, noting their sleek designs and the energy readings that made his best engineers shake their heads in disbelief. The vessels seemed to bend light around their hulls, creating an almost ethereal appearance that spoke of technology far beyond anything humanity had achieved. Each ship was roughly the size of a city block, their surfaces covered in geometric patterns that pulsed with soft blue light. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies," reported Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her station at the communications console. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic interface as she tried to clean up the signal. "It's being broadcast in what appears to be multiple languages simultaneously, but our computers are having trouble with the translation matrix." Jake nodded toward the main screen. "Put it through, Lieutenant. Let's hear what our visitors have to say." The view screen flickered and resolved into the image of a tall, crystalline being whose skin seemed to capture and reflect every wavelength of light. Commander Zara Kellogg stood in what appeared to be the bridge of her flagship, surrounded by other aliens whose appearances varied dramatically from one another. Behind her, insectoid creatures moved in perfect synchronization, while amphibious beings floated in specialized tanks. "Primitive inhabitants of the third planet," Zara began, her voice carrying an unmistakable tone of condescension, even through the translation software. "I am Commander Zara Kellogg of the Galactic Council. Expeditionary Fleet. Your species has been evaluated and found suitable for integration into the greater galactic community under our guidance and protection." Jake felt his jaw tighten as he listened to the alien's words. Around the command center, his officers exchanged glances that ranged from amazement at finally encountering alien life to growing anger at the dismissive tone of the message. The implications of what they were hearing began to sink in as Zara continued her transmission. "You will surrender all military assets and submit to peaceful occupation within 72 of your planetary rotations. Compliance will result in minimal disruption to your daily lives as you are educated in proper galactic citizenship. Resistance will be met with appropriate force to ensure the safety of our personnel and the completion of our mission." The transmission continued with detailed instructions for surrender protocols, locations where human leaders should report for processing, and guidelines for the orderly transfer of governmental authority to alien administrators. Throughout the message, the aliens spoke as if human compliance was inevitable, treating the conquest of Earth as nothing more than a bureaucratic procedure to be completed efficiently. Jake waited until the transmission ended before responding. He looked around the command center at the faces of men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting Earth and its colonies. These were people who had grown up hearing stories of humanity's long struggle to reach the stars, who had trained for years to defend their home against unknown threats from the void between worlds. "Open a return channel, Lieutenant Rodriguez. Let's make sure our message reaches every ship in their fleet." Amy's fingers danced across her console as she established the connection. "Channel open, sir. You're broadcasting to all 12 alien vessels." Jake straightened his shoulders and looked directly into the camera that would carry his words to the alien fleet. Behind him, the Earth hung in space like a blue marble, beautiful and fragile and worth fighting for. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet determination that had characterized humanity's greatest moments throughout history. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. I'm speaking for all of humanity when I say this. We don't kneel to anyone. If you want our world, you'll have to take it, and we'll make you pay for every inch." The response from the alien fleet was swift and predictable. Energy beams lanced out from the lead vessels, targeting the orbital defense platforms that protected Earth's shipping lanes. The weapons were clearly intended as a demonstration rather than a serious attack, designed to show human defenders the futility of resistance against superior technology. What the aliens didn't expect was the immediate response from hidden positions throughout the solar system. Jake had been preparing for this moment since the first alien scouts appeared, repositioning assets and developing tactics based on careful analysis of the enemy's behavior patterns. The human response was swift, coordinated, and utterly ruthless. The first engagement took place near Mars Station, where Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez led a squadron of modified civilian transports against the alien reconnaissance group. Her ships had been stripped of unnecessary equipment and fitted with experimental weapons that human engineers had developed by reverse engineering alien technology captured from earlier scout missions. Amy's tactical approach would have horrified any military academy instructor. She used the asteroid belt as cover, hiding her ships among the tumbling rocks until the alien vessels moved within range. When she finally revealed her position, her pilots didn't engage in the elegant formation-based combat that the aliens expected. Instead, they attacked like a pack of wolves, using every dirty trick that centuries of human warfare had developed. The aliens found themselves facing opponents who rammed damaged ships into their vessels rather than allowing capture, who used debris fields as weapons by detonating asteroids in the paths of incoming ships, and who coordinated suicide runs that somehow managed to save civilian transports even as military vessels were destroyed. Commander Zara Kellox watched the battle from her flagship with growing confusion. Her tactical computers had predicted easy victory based on technological superiority, but the humans were fighting in ways that made no logical sense. They sacrificed valuable military assets to protect civilian vessels, wasted firepower on already disabled ships to prevent capture, and continued fighting even when their vessels were critically damaged. The most disturbing aspect of the battle was the human communications traffic that her translators were intercepting. The aliens had expected to hear panic, desperation, and pleas for mercy as the humans realized the hopelessness of their situation. Instead, they heard something far more unsettling: determination, anger, and what could only be described as grim satisfaction. Rodriguez to all units. Amy's voice crackled across the communications channels as her ship limped away from the battlefield with hull breaches on 3 decks. Remember what we're fighting for. Every minute we keep them busy is another minute for the evacuation ships to reach safety. Make them pay for everything. The battle ended with a tactical victory for the alien forces, but the cost had been far higher than anyone in the Galactic Council had anticipated. They had destroyed or disabled most of the human vessels, but they had lost 3 ships of their own and suffered damage to 4 others. More importantly, they had failed to prevent the escape of civilian transports carrying thousands of humans to hidden refugees throughout the outer system. Back aboard her flagship, Commander Zara Kellox reviewed the battle recordings with her senior officers. The Craxi Admiral Vextar studied the tactical data with his collective consciousness, trying to understand how primitively armed humans had managed to inflict such damage on advanced alien technology. Their tactics make no sense from a logical standpoint, Vextar reported, his antennae twitching with confusion. They prioritized the survival of non-combatants over military objectives. They wasted resources on emotional responses rather than optimal strategic choices. Yet somehow they achieved objectives that should have been impossible given their technological limitations. The Vorthak elder Gloomoth floated in his tank, tentacles moving in patterns that indicated deep thought. Commander Kellox, review the intercepted human communications again. There is something in their responses that troubles me. Zara activated the recordings, and the bridge filled with human voices speaking in dozens of different languages, but sharing a common tone of fierce determination. The translations revealed something that made the aliens increasingly uncomfortable. The humans weren't afraid of dying. They were afraid of failing to protect others. This cannot be accurate, Admiral Vextar declared, his collective consciousness struggling to process such an alien concept. No rational species prioritizes individual survival below abstract concepts like duty or protection of weaker members. Their behavior suggests a fundamental malfunction in their survival programming. But Commander Zara Kellox was beginning to suspect that what they were seeing wasn't a malfunction at all. The humans had fought with a creativity and desperation that suggested they understood exactly what defeat would mean. They had sacrificed themselves not out of confused thinking, but out of a clear understanding that some things were more important than individual survival. As the alien fleet regrouped and prepared for the assault on Earth itself, intercepted, the invasion of New Texas colony should have been over in 3 days. Admiral Vextar had calculated the odds with his collective consciousness, factoring in the alien technological advantage, the isolated nature of the farming settlement, and the limited military assets available to the human defenders. Every logical analysis pointed to swift victory, followed by efficient occupation protocols. 6 weeks later, the Craxi admiral found himself staring at tactical displays that made no sense according to any military doctrine he had studied in 4,000 years of galactic warfare. The humans on New Texas were still fighting, still inflicting casualties, and still preventing the aliens from establishing the secure foothold they needed for the next phase of their invasion plan. Ben Parker had been a simple farmer before the aliens arrived, growing crops in the rich soil of New Texas and raising livestock that would feed the growing colonial population. His hands were calloused from working the land, his face weathered by years under an alien sun, and his formal military training consisted of basic militia exercises that most colonists learned as teenagers. By every reasonable standard, he should have surrendered on the first day when alien dropships landed in his cornfields. Instead, Ben had become something that Admiral Vextar's collective consciousness couldn't understand. A guerrilla leader who fought not because he had any hope of winning, but because he refused to let his neighbors live under alien rule. The transformation had happened gradually, as the reality of occupation became clear. The aliens weren't interested in peaceful coexistence or gradual integration. They wanted complete submission, total control, and the reduction of human beings to the status of useful animals. The first week of occupation had proceeded according to alien expectations. Dropships landed near major settlements, armored troops established control points, and human leaders were summoned to receive instructions from their new masters. Most colonies throughout human space had followed similar patterns, with brief resistance followed by sullen acceptance of alien authority. But New Texas was different, and Ben Parker was the reason why. On the morning when alien soldiers came to his farm to register his family for relocation to a designated residential zone, Ben had looked at his wife Sarah and his 2 young daughters and made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. He told the aliens that his family would not be moving anywhere, and when they insisted, he shot the squad leader with an old hunting rifle that shouldn't have been able to penetrate advanced alien armor. The rifle blast that killed the first alien soldier on New Texas wasn't remarkable for its technological sophistication. What made it significant was that Ben had modified the ammunition using techniques he learned from intercepted alien communications, creating projectiles that could disrupt energy shields through harmonic resonance. More importantly, the sound of that first shot had been heard by every human on the colony, and it had told them something crucial. The aliens could die. Within hours, Ben's farmhouse had become the center of a resistance network that spread across the entire colony. Farmers, mechanics, teachers, and shopkeepers began arriving with whatever weapons they could find, bringing skills that the aliens had never considered relevant to military operations. These weren't professional soldiers trained in conventional warfare. They were people who knew every inch of their world and had spent their lives solving practical problems with limited resources. Admiral Vextar observed the developing resistance through orbital surveillance systems that should have made human guerrilla operations impossible to sustain. His ships could track individual humans from space, analyze their movement patterns, and predict their likely objectives with mathematical precision. Yet somehow the humans continued to strike at alien installations, disappear into terrain that offered no concealment, and coordinate attacks across distances that should have made communication impossible. The problem, as the Craxi Collective gradually realized, was that the humans weren't following any military doctrine that alien forces had encountered before. Ben Parker's fighters didn't establish bases that could be attacked, didn't maintain supply lines that could be cut, and didn't operate according to hierarchical command structures that could be disrupted by eliminating key leaders. Instead, they fought like the native life forms of their adopted world. They used networks of natural caves and abandoned mining tunnels that honeycombed the colonial territory. They cached weapons and supplies in hundreds of small hiding places, rather than maintaining central armories. Most frustrating of all, they seemed to operate through a combination of predetermined plans and spontaneous coordination that made their actions unpredictable even to advanced alien intelligence systems. The real breakthrough for human resistance came when Dr. Lisa Chang was captured. During the fall of Luna Base 3 months into the invasion, the xenobiologist had been studying alien technology since the first scout ships appeared, and her captivity provided an unexpected opportunity for direct observation of alien psychology and behavior patterns. Dr. Chung found herself brought before the ancient Vorthak Elder Glumoth in his specialized holding tank aboard the flagship. The amphibious being had lived for over 2 millennia and had overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds. He considered himself an expert in the psychology of inferior species, and he was confident that a simple human scientist would provide useful insights into human resistance patterns. Your species persists in futile combat despite obvious technological inferiority. Glumoth gurgled through his translation device, tentacles moving in patterns that indicated patient condescension. Explain the logical basis for continued resistance when surrender would preserve more human lives. Dr. Chang studied the ancient alien with the same scientific curiosity she would have applied to any new specimen. After months of analyzing intercepted alien communications, she had developed theories about the fundamental differences between human and alien psychology, and this conversation was providing valuable confirmation of her hypotheses. "You're asking the wrong question," she replied calmly, noting how the alien's tentacles stiffened at her unexpected response. "You want to know why we keep fighting when we can't win, but that assumes we're fighting to win in the first place." The concept seemed to confuse the Vorthak Elder, whose species had optimized their civilization around logical cost-benefit analysis for over 10,000 years. Glumoth's tentacles moved in questioning patterns as he tried to process the idea of engaging in conflict without victory as an objective. Clarify your statement. If victory is not your objective, what purpose does resistance serve? Your actions result in unnecessary casualties and resource expenditure with no corresponding strategic gain. Dr. Chang smiled, and there was something in that expression that made the ancient alien uncomfortable, for reasons he couldn't identify. "We're not fighting to win. We're fighting to show you that conquering us will cost more than leaving us alone. Every day we resist, every soldier you lose, every plan we disrupt, it all sends the same message to other species who might be watching. Some fights are worth having even when you know you'll lose." The interrogation continued for hours, but Glumoth found himself increasingly disturbed by the human scientist's responses. She spoke of concepts that had no equivalent in any alien language. Duty without reward, sacrifice without logic, and most unsettling of all, the idea that some principles were more important than survival itself. Meanwhile, on New Texas Colony, Ben Parker was implementing a strategy that would have been impossible for any conventional military force to execute. His resistance fighters had studied their alien occupiers carefully, identifying weaknesses that the invaders didn't know they possessed. The aliens relied on technological superiority and assumed that their advanced equipment made them invulnerable to primitive human weapons. But Ben's people had learned that alien energy shields were vulnerable to specific frequencies, that their armor had weak points where different materials joined, and most importantly, that alien soldiers had never learned to fight opponents who didn't follow civilized rules of engagement. The turning point came when alien forces captured a transport ship carrying evacuees from Titan Colony, including women, children, and elderly humans who had been fleeing toward the outer system refugees. The aliens expected this capture to break human morale and force surrender negotiations, following standard protocols that had worked on dozens of other worlds throughout galactic history. Instead, they discovered that taking human civilians hostage was the worst possible tactical decision they could have made. Captain Nick Foster received word of the capture while commanding a small battle group that was already outnumbered and outgunned by the alien fleet. According to every principle of military logic, he should have withdrawn to preserve his remaining ships for future operations. Foster's response became legendary among human resistance movements throughout the galaxy. He led a desperate assault against impossible odds, using every ship under his command in a coordinated attack that had only one objective: rescuing the civilian hostages regardless of the cost to his military assets. The battle lasted 18 hours and resulted in the complete destruction of Foster's battle group, but not before his forces had successfully exited. The underground facility on Earth had been carved from solid rock beneath the Rocky Mountains, its existence hidden from alien orbital scans by layers of specialized shielding that human engineers had developed through careful study of captured alien technology. Deep within this secret complex, Tony Vasquez worked 18-hour shifts analyzing the wreckage of Zephyrian fighters that had been shot down during the early battles of the invasion. Tony had been a mechanical engineer before the war, designing efficient propulsion systems for civilian spacecraft and mining equipment. His formal education had focused on practical applications rather than theoretical physics, and he had never imagined that his knowledge of stress patterns and material properties would become crucial to humanity's survival. But the alien invasion had transformed many ordinary people into unlikely heroes, and Tony's particular genius lay in understanding how things worked by taking them apart. The Zephyrian shield generator spread across his workbench looked like a piece of crystalline art rather than military hardware. Its surfaces reflected light in impossible patterns, and energy readings fluctuated according to mathematical principles that had taken Tony weeks to understand. According to every textbook he had studied, the device should have been impossible to reverse engineer without decades of research and development. But Tony wasn't trying to understand the theoretical principles behind Zephyrian technology. He was looking for weaknesses, flaws, and practical limitations that could be exploited by human weapon systems. His approach was methodical and brutally practical. If he couldn't build something better than the aliens, he would find ways to make their superior technology work against them. The breakthrough came during his analysis of the shield harmonics. Zephyrian defensive systems operated by creating overlapping energy fields that deflected incoming projectiles and absorbed directed energy weapons. The technology was elegant, efficient, and had protected alien ships for thousands of years against every form of attack they had encountered throughout galactic space. What Tony discovered was that the shield's strength was also their weakness. The harmonic frequencies that made them so effective against conventional weapons created resonance patterns that could be exploited if someone understood the underlying mathematics. By modifying human weapons to generate specific frequency combinations, it was possible to create cascade failures that would bring down even the most advanced alien defensive systems. The first test of Tony's modified weapons came 3 weeks later when Captain Maya Thompson led the newly commissioned USS Defiance on its maiden mission. The ship itself was unlike anything in the previous human fleet, designed specifically for asymmetric warfare against technologically superior opponents. Where traditional human vessels had focused on durability and firepower, the Defiance prioritized stealth, speed, and the ability to strike from unexpected angles. Maya had been selected to command the Defiance not because of her conventional military record, but because of her willingness to abandon traditional tactics in favor of strategies that enemy commanders wouldn't anticipate. Her approach to space combat borrowed heavily from guerrilla warfare techniques, treating each engagement as an opportunity to teach the aliens that their technological advantage couldn't protect them from human creativity. The Defiance's first target was an isolated Craxi patrol group that was investigating reports of human activity in the asteroid belt beyond Mars. The alien ships followed standard search patterns, using advanced sensors to scan for hidden bases and supply caches that intelligence reports suggested might be concealed among the tumbling rocks and ice fragments. Maya watched the alien patrol from a hiding position inside a hollowed-out asteroid, studying their movement patterns and communication protocols through passive sensors that Tony's team had adapted from captured alien technology. The Craxi ships were efficient and methodical, exactly what she expected from a species that had eliminated individual thought in favor of collective decision-making. What the aliens didn't know was that the asteroid field had been carefully prepared as a trap. Human engineers had spent months placing charges throughout the rock formations, creating a three-dimensional minefield that could be activated remotely. More importantly, they had used alien communication frequencies to create false signals that would draw the patrol ships into optimal attack positions. The engagement lasted only minutes, but it demonstrated everything that was wrong with alien assumptions about human warfare. The Defiance attacked without warning, using weapons modified with Tony's harmonic frequency discoveries to penetrate Craxi shields that should have been impenetrable. When the aliens tried to respond with conventional tactics, they found themselves fighting an opponent that refused to engage in honorable combat. Maya's ship struck from concealment, disappeared behind asteroid cover before return fire could be targeted, and used the prepared charges to create debris fields that disrupted alien sensor systems. Most shocking of all, the Defiance didn't try to destroy the alien ships outright. Instead, it disabled their engines and communication systems, leaving them helpless while human boarding parties captured critical intelligence and technology. The psychological impact of the attack was far more significant than the tactical victory. Admiral Vextar received fragmented distress signals from his patrol ships before all communication ceased, leaving him to wonder what had happened to vessels that should have been invulnerable to primitive human weapons. When search and rescue ships finally reached the location, they found drifting hulks with crews that had been systematically interrogated before being abandoned in functioning life pods. Back on the Craxi flagship, Admiral Vextar struggled to understand how humans had developed weapons capable of penetrating advanced alien shields. His collective consciousness analyzed every piece of available data, searching for logical explanations that could account for such rapid technological advancement by a primitive species. The answer came from intercepted human communications that revealed the scope of their reverse engineering efforts. Underground facilities throughout human space were analyzing captured alien technology, not to understand it completely, but to find ways to turn it against its creators. Human engineers were approaching alien science with a practical ruthlessness that focused on immediate military applications rather than long-term research goals. Commander, Zara Kellogg's found herself facing a completely transformed enemy as reports arrived from across the invasion zone. Human ships that had been easily destroyed in early engagements were now penetrating alien defenses with weapons that shouldn't have existed. Human ground forces were using modified alien equipment to ambush occupation troops in terrain that orbital surveillance claimed was empty. Most disturbing of all, human resistance movements were capturing alien personnel and extracting information through interrogation techniques that violated every principle of civilized warfare. The transformation was visible in every aspect of human military operations. Where they had once relied on crude chemical weapons and primitive tactics, they now employed sophisticated electronic warfare systems derived from alien technology. Their ships incorporated shield generators reverse-engineered from captured equipment, while their ground forces used energy weapons that fired modified alien ammunition designed to exploit weaknesses in standard galactic armor. But the real change was in human psychology and strategic thinking. The early months of the invasion had taught humanity that their enemies were not invincible gods with incomprehensible technology. They were simply another species with their own limitations, blind spots, and vulnerabilities that could be identified and exploited by anyone willing to study them carefully enough. Captain Maya Thompson exemplified this new approach to warfare as she led the Defiance on increasingly ambitious missions throughout the outer system. Her ship had become a symbol of human adaptation, demonstrating that technological inferiority could be overcome through tactical creativity and willingness to fight without regard for conventional rules of engagement. The aliens began to realize that they were no longer fighting the same species they had initially invaded. The humans had evolved during the course of the war, transforming from primitive defenders into sophisticated predators who studied their enemies with scientific precision before striking with calculated brutality. Every battle taught them new lessons about alien weaknesses. Every captured piece of technology gave them new capabilities, and every tactical victory demonstrated that the balance of power was shifting in ways that no one had anticipated. Reports reached the Galactic Council of human ships appearing in systems that should have been impossible for them to reach, of alien installations being destroyed by weapons that incorporated their own technology, and most alarming of all, of human forces that seemed to anticipate alien movements with uncanny accuracy. The primitive species that had been expected to surrender within weeks was not only still fighting but was beginning to hunt. The Hunter's commander Zara Kellogg stared at the tactical displays showing human activity throughout the invasion zone and realized that everything had changed. The aliens were no longer conducting a conquest operation against primitive resistance fighters. They were engaged in a war of survival again. The space around the galactic core had never witnessed a battle like this one. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching as the combined human fleet took position against odds that would have seemed impossible just 2 years ago. The alien armada stretched across space like a constellation of death. 12,000 ships representing every advanced civilization in the Galactic Council. Kate's fleet numbered barely 800 vessels. A mix of converted civilian ships, captured alien technology, and the new warships that human engineers had built using lessons learned from months of desperate fighting. The numbers were overwhelming against humanity, but Kate wasn't trying to win a conventional battle. She was trying to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. For the next 1,000 years, the human admiral had earned her position through a combination of tactical brilliance and absolute ruthlessness that had made her name feared throughout alien space. She had been the one to develop the doctrine of total warfare that humanity now employed, treating every alien installation, every supply line, and every non-combatant facility as a legitimate target in the fight for human survival. Commander Zara Kellox watched the approaching human fleet from her flagship and felt something she had never experienced in 3,000 years of military service. The crystalline being who had once dismissed humans as primitive savages now commanded an alien force that had learned to fear the very mention of human ships. The sleek vessels approaching her position moved with a coordination and purpose that spoke of careful planning and absolute determination. The battle began with a human tactic that violated every principle of civilized warfare that the Galactic Council had established over millennia of conquest. Instead of targeting military assets, the human fleet launched simultaneous attacks against alien supply ships, medical facilities, and command vessels carrying senior officers. Kate Sullivan had studied alien psychology carefully and understood that species accustomed to logical, honorable combat would be psychologically devastated by opponents who refused to follow any rules. Human ships equipped with modified alien weapons tore through Zephyrian shields that had protected their vessels for centuries. The energy beams that lanced out from human gun ports used harmonic frequencies, specifically designed to create cascade failures in alien defensive systems. More terrifying still, human boarding parties used captured alien technology to breach hull integrity and fight hand-to-hand battles inside enemy ships where their technological advantages meant nothing. The psychological warfare was equally devastating. Human communication systems broadcast recordings throughout the alien fleet, sharing stories of their species' history and their refusal to surrender even against impossible odds. The aliens heard accounts of human wars where entire populations had chosen death over subjugation, of battles where outnumbered human forces had fought to the last person rather than accept defeat. Admiral Vextar found his collective consciousness experiencing something that Craxi had eliminated from their species thousands of years ago: individual fear. The logical analysis that had always guided Craxi decision-making was breaking down as human tactics defied every probability calculation. His ships were being destroyed by weapons that shouldn't exist, using strategies that made no logical sense, by enemies who seemed to prefer death to surrender. The turning point came when human forces targeted the alien command structure with precision strikes that demonstrated their understanding of galactic military organization. Kate Sullivan had studied intercepted alien communications for months, mapping the relationships between different species and identifying the key individuals whose deaths would create maximum chaos in the enemy fleet. Captain Maya Thompson led the assault on the Craxi flagship, her modified ship cutting through alien defenses like they were made of paper. The Defiance had been upgraded with the most advanced human technology, incorporating alien systems that Tony Vasquez's team had reverse-engineered and improved upon. The ship moved with an agility that alien sensors couldn't track, striking from impossible angles and disappearing before return fire could be targeted. The death of Admiral Vexitar sent shockwaves through the alien fleet as the Craxi collective consciousness began to fragment without its central coordinating node. Individual Craxi found themselves experiencing emotions they had never felt before, including the terror of personal extinction and the chaos of independent thought. The perfect unity that had made them feared throughout the galaxy became a weakness that human forces exploited with surgical precision. Commander Zara Kellox realized that she was witnessing the collapse of everything the Galactic Council represented. The human fleet wasn't just winning battles. It was demonstrating that the fundamental assumptions underlying galactic civilization were wrong. Species that had dominated space for millennia were being defeated by primitives who refused to accept the natural order of technological superiority. The final engagement centered around Zara's flagship as human ships converged on the remaining alien command vessel. Admiral Kate Sullivan led the assault personally, bringing the Indomitable into close combat range where alien weapons couldn't be brought to bear effectively. The two ships circled each other like ancient sailing vessels, exchanging fire at ranges where crew members could see their enemies through reinforced viewports. Kate opened a direct communication channel to the alien commander, her voice carrying across space to reach not just Zara but every surviving ship in both fleets. When she spoke, her words carried the quiet confidence of someone who had already won the only victory that mattered. Commander Kellox, I'm offering you terms that your council should have offered us from the beginning. Your forces will withdraw from all human space immediately. You will pay reparations for the damage you've caused to our worlds and colonies. Most importantly, you will spread the word throughout the galaxy that humanity is not to be threatened again. Zara's response came through translation, systems that struggled to convey the mixture of defeat and bewilderment in her voice. Admiral Sullivan, your demands are unreasonable. We still outnumber your forces significantly. Logic suggests that continued combat will result in mutual destruction. Kate's laugh carried no humor, only the grim satisfaction of someone who had learned that fear was the most effective weapon in the galaxy. Commander, you still don't understand what you're dealing with. We're not afraid of mutual destruction. We've been preparing for it since the day you arrived. The only question is whether you're ready to explain to your council why you chose extinction over negotiation. The alien commander studied the tactical displays showing human ships positioned throughout the battle zone and realized that Admiral Sullivan wasn't bluffing. The human fleet had been arranged not for victory, but for maximum destruction, designed to ensure that even if every human ship was destroyed, the alien fleet would suffer casualties that would cripple galactic military power for generations. Zara thought about the reports that had reached her from throughout human space, accounts of entire colonies that had chosen scorched earth tactics rather than surrender, of human civilians who had destroyed their own infrastructure to deny it to alien occupiers, of a species that had somehow turned love into a weapon by refusing to let those they cared about live in chains. What are you? Zara asked, the question that had haunted her since the first human resistance on New Texas colony. Kate Sullivan's response became the foundation of humanity's reputation throughout galactic space, the words that would be remembered long after the specific details of the war had been forgotten. We're the species that evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill us. We learned that the only way to survive is to be scarier than whatever's hunting you. The alien fleet accepted human terms within hours, beginning a withdrawal that would take months to complete, but marked the end of galactic expansion through conquest. The species that had ruled space through technological superiority had encountered something more dangerous. A civilization that measured strength not in weapons or ships, but in the willingness to sacrifice everything rather than accept subjugation. Years later, when new species approached the edges of galactic space, they received the same advice that had become standard throughout the Council territories. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but there was one region that was marked with warnings in every known language. The small yellow star and its collection of planets were protected by beings who had redefined what it meant to be afraid. Humanity had taken its place among the galactic powers not through technological advancement or superior numbers, but by demonstrating that some species were too dangerous to fight and too valuable to ignore. They had proven that civilization and savagery weren't opposites but tools, and that the greatest warriors were those who fought not for conquest but for the protection of those they loved. The war was over, but its lessons would echo through galactic space for millennia. Fear had found a new definition, and it wore a human face.